For our next power pairing, Strategies to Rebuild a Better Normal, please welcome Arianna Huffington, founder and CEO, Thrive Global, Angela Duckworth, founder and CEO, Character Lab, and moderator Desiree Gruber, CEO, Full.
I am so excited to be here today with you two amazing women. Now, these are two women who've written books that have changed the landscape for a lot of executives across the board. Angela, Grit, The Power of Perseverance. Arianna, Thrive. Now, these are two books that are on my bookshelf. I recommend them all the time. And today, as Maura kicked off the summit, she said, nothing about this year has been planned or expected. So we've got two super bright minds here. What do you guys think? What are we doing? You couldn't have a more complicated time in history for us to think about thriving and having grit. What do we do post-COVID? Where are we?
Arianna, I was going to say, let's make Arianna start.
Yeah. You're mute.
Well, first of all, let me just say it's wonderful to be here with you, Desiree, and with Angela, whose work I so admire and couldn't be more for these times. When she wrote Grit, I'm sure she didn't know that grit, or another word for it is resilience, is the most important quality we need right now. And I must say, sometimes people may think that grit and thriving are on opposite sides, that there is tension between them. But I absolutely believe, and Angela agrees, that in fact, when you are thriving, when you are putting your own oxygen mask on first, when you take care of yourself, when you make sure you have enough sleep, you move, you watch your thoughts, and have gratitude for what you have, even in the middle of this incredibly difficult time, you are much more likely to tap into your grit and your resilience. So for me, what is exciting is that while we need to acknowledge how incredibly hard and painful this time is for millions of people with incredible losses of loved ones, financial losses, also it's a catalyst to leave behind the way we're living our lives that was not working and tap into these deep resources, these deep treasures in ourselves that we were not really giving ourselves the time to explore and to connect with, which means that when we come out of the pandemic, we will be able to build a world which is better than the world we left behind.
I'll just double click on what Arianna said. I think it's not intuitive. It's also not necessarily our reflex when we're threatened and in a state of fear and anxiety. Our attention, in some ways, quite spontaneously and without our thinking about it, like goes to ourselves and our own problems. And the trick here, I think, is to resist that initial impulse to like only think about your own problems, of which you have many and probably more than you had in 2019, but actually to focus outward. And the people who I think are truly thriving this year are the ones who, despite everything happening to them, are truly outward focused and asking, like, who can I call today just to say like, hey, I'm so glad I'm friends with you, or like, what email do you get in your inbox where you say, you know what, I'm going to do a favor for this total stranger. I think those are the individuals who are doing well for themselves and, of course, doing well for others.
And what is interesting is that, in fact, I find in the work we're doing at Thrive with companies and individuals that when they can focus inward to refresh and renew and replenish themselves, they have more to give outward. When you are depleted, you are much more likely to move into fight or flight or just survival. But when you are recharged, you have that energy to give from your overflow.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, Arianna, for me, it's really like 11 o'clock, it kicks in where I have the fight or flight. I'm like, oh my God, I have so much more to do. but I need to rest. It's time for me to go to bed. I have to thrive. I have to put my phone in its little bed, right, Arianna? And then at the same time, I'm like, Angela Duckworth, grit, be grittier. I have to solve things. I want other people to wake up in the morning and have answers to their emails. I've got to dig down and find my inner reserve to try a little harder. So it's this weird, for me, tension of trying to find both. So I don't know, Arianna, if there's anything that you could say to us at 11 o'clock, how do we shut down that inner tension, those two, between the two of you? My two
Well,
little voices on my shoulder.
actually, I really believe that we are saying the same thing because we have so much science now and so much data that makes it clear. As athletes know, recovery is part of peak performance. If we want to be our best, especially in times of crisis, if we want to be our most creative and most innovative, we can't do it while we are running on empty. And I studied economics, and the one thing that has stayed with me is the concept of diminishing returns. Spending endless hours at your desk or your kitchen table doesn't mean you're being effective and productive. And we have some amazing new research out of Yale that shows that when you are stressed and anxious, that's when you are least productive. Almost your prefrontal cortex shuts down and you move into that fight or flight. So at 11 o'clock, Desiree, darling, turn your phone off, put it in its little bed outside your room. I like to have a little transition to sleep, a hot shower to wash away the day, reading a book that has nothing to do with work, just kind of preparing ourselves to be able to disconnect from all our problems and projects and recharge.
Yeah. So Angela, that would lead me to you in thinking about, how do we find this inner resilience and grit when we're in that moment? We're like, okay, I'm taking a break, I'm recharging, but I know tomorrow I want to come back at it super strong. Is there a secret that you've discovered over the years in studying all these super athletes and high performers?
When people even say the word passion, right? And I define grit as passion and perseverance for long-term goals. Just what comes to mind is intensity. Maybe what comes to mind is the mental image of somebody pulling their third all-nighter or like clenching their teeth. But actually, something that surprised me when I began to study high achievers is that it's not necessarily the intensity that's so remarkable about them. It really is their consistency and their stamina. So it's not about pulling 3 all-nighters. It's actually about being able to maintain a devotion to something for years or decades. I mean, even a lifetime. And when you think about this marathon, not a sprint, it makes everything that Ariana said so kind of strikingly obvious in a way. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to go to bed. Like I have to actually exercise. I have to take a walk. Like I have to actually make time for friendship and family because otherwise I'm going to burn out. And that's actually not what champions do. Like, go for these big bouts of intensity followed by nothing. So I think consistency and stamina are kind of the hidden side of passion.
I love that. And sometimes we tell, as when we hire a tribe, we make it very clear that sometimes you may need the intensity of pulling an all nighter because you are shipping a product or you have a deadline for a customer. But then we have something called thrive time. So immediately after, take time to recharge.
Yeah.
And so it's not like a balance that you are always working 9 to 5 or anything like that. That's obviously impossible in anything you are passionate about. But knowing that you need to recharge after a period of high intensity is the key. Otherwise, that's when people get sick. That's when they do their worst work and make their worst mistakes.
True. Arianna, I know that you're advising a lot of major corporations right now on how to bring their employees through this pandemic, health, well-being, mental health. What are some of the best practices that you're seeing right now in helping these companies do?
So, what we're seeing that is unprecedented is that management now recognizes that the well being and mental resilience of their employees is critical for business success. It's no longer considered as a nice to have perk or benefit. It's sort of existential. And that's a huge shift for companies, especially as we are all seeing great increases in depression and anxiety. They understand how this affects productivity. And what I love is that we are working not just with those, like all of us here who have the luxury to work from home, but we are working with frontline workers. At Walmart, for example, 2.2 million associates, and being able to help them with these micro steps, these better choices that make them more resilient, but also make them take care of themselves in order to be able to take care of customers, their work, their families. That's really the connection that is ironically easier to make now, and I hope we'll take with us post-pandemic.
True. On the counterpoint, Angela, how about the moms out there with families and kids, and what can we do right now to model resilience for our children? Even, I mean, they're living with me, so they're living with you, so they realize sometimes that you are stressed and you're seeing them. Whereas normally I saw him, pre-9, after 6. Now he's seeing me in the middle of the day, interrupting calls, and you can see the anxiety. And I'm like, not now. So it's like a whole new way of seeing each other.
So the single most important thing I think that parents do is provide a role model for their kids for all aspects of your character, not just grit. You're kind or you're not kind, your kids are watching you. And those are powerful lessons. I think what 2020 introduced is that now our kids are kind of with us during our work day. We're with them during their school day. So the dosage of modeling has just, increased exponentially. The lesson that I think we take from the modeling research is not that we have to be perfect role models, because you're not trying to, present for your kids like an edited, curated Instagram version of a real mom. I mean, you have emotions, you have bad days. Probably, if you're like me, you lose your temper sometimes. You say things that you regret almost immediately after you say them. And I think the role modeling that we want to do with our kids is, trying to show them that you're trying, and that when you have a good day, you learn from it. And when you have a bad day, you apologize, and if you need to, and you learn from that. And I think actually, sharing with our kids that we're human beings, and that we're not, like these perfect people. They kind of knew that already. But I do think modeling learning and having an approach, which is whatever happens today, I'm going to get something out of it so that tomorrow can, hopefully be a better day.
I love that. And it's also one of the things I'm most optimistic about, which is that we have neglected teaching our children character and life skills. And we have focused more on their SAT scores and what college they're going to get into. And as a result, a lot of college kids were not prepared for what happened. So this is really a lesson for all of us to prioritize character and grit and knowing how to take care of yourself and tap into your deepest, wisest, most giving and empathetic self. And that is a life skill that I think, frankly, is the most important skill we can teach our children. And that's an opportunity to do that instead of going on automatic again about scores and grades and crowding their lives in order to get into a good college.
I love what you're saying, Arianna. It's so true, because a lot of what you talk about has scientific evidence behind it, but we've needed this moment, like this forcing function of everything to come to a slam stop for us to realize, hey, we're not handling these things correctly. We know it. We've seen the evidence for years, but we're not doing it. So we've got 4 minutes left. I wanted to throw it out to both of you and say, what are things post-pandemic that you're hopeful for, things that have been happening right now, lessons that we've learned that you want to keep moving forward with, and sort of say, what is our bright new future here?
Maybe I'll start. One of my favorite research studies was on the London Tube, right? So there was a strike that shut down part of the subway system in London, the London Tube. And so, just by that coincidence, there were all these travelers, all these commuters who had to find a different way on the same tube, but to their, destination of work. This is pre-pandemic, by the way. So what happens after the strike is over? Well, you expect people to go back to what they used to do, the route that was presumably the shortest route, because that's the route they had always taken to work. I think it was about 5% of London commuters actually had, during that crisis, found a better and more efficient way to get to where they were going. And I think it's a great metaphor for all of us. What did we have to do in 2020 that actually we discovered is better than what we were doing in 2019? And just one specific and kind of trivial example for me is that, to get my 10,000 steps in, I take a walk with my husband now right before dinner. And I never did that before. And it was never a daily ritual. And I absolutely hope to keep up that ritual even after the vaccine and, we're no longer working from home.
I love that. And it's also a reminder. Sorry, the sun is coming right on my face.
You're an angel. An angel's alighted on you.
I'm about to levitate. It's a reminder what Angela did, that we are storytelling animals. And we learn through stories. And I think one of the great things of this time is the stories we're hearing that encourage us to tap into these deepest resources, find our deepest grit and empathy, and live our lives from that place instead of from the frenetic, breathless place that we lived our lives pre-pandemic. We all can identify with that. And as Angela said, if we can Marie Kondo our lives and see what do we want to leave behind post-pandemic, what do we want to bring with us, and empathy, grit, the recognition that recharging is not a luxury and it's not selfish, are some of the things that I want to bring with us, as well as this incredible solidarity among women. I know Desiree and I are part of a women's group. The support for each other during these times has definitely intensified. And it would be great for all of us in our own circles, as well as beyond our own immediate circles, to bring that feeling of support and solidarity into the new world.
We can't end on better words of wisdom than that. And everybody, if you want more from Angela and Arianna, they both have Sunday afternoon email blasts that just make me, feel so connected and ready for the week. And thank you guys for that. But if you guys need more inspiration, please check out those. And thanks so much for joining us today. That was amazing.
Thank you.
That was fun.
Okay. Bye, guys.